Hello from world famous Brooks Falls. This is Ranger Mike Fitz at Katmai National Park and Preserve. It's June 30th, 2016, and for the next hour or so I will be doing a live play-by-play on the webcams through Explore.org, our proud partner that helps to bring the webcams, or excuse me, the Brooks River here in Katmai National Park live to anyone really with an internet connection around the world. So I'm very thankful for their support and generosity to make this a reality. This evening I'm going to be talking about, well, whatever really kind of catches my attention. We'll talk about the individual bears that we see. We'll talk about how they interact with one another, how they fish, the types maybe of fish that they're catching, and maybe whatever else catches my attention. I won't be monitoring the chat on Explore.org, so I won't be reading those comments. I'll be focused on the river and what's in front of me, but I'll do my best to try to answer a lot of the common questions and things that you might be wondering about with these bears here. I am also on a public wildlife viewing platform, so other people will be standing here with me. You may hear other voices from time to time, and that's okay. We're standing on an elevated platform about 10 feet above the ground here at Brooks Falls. So maybe to begin, let's talk about what bears we actually do see here. If you're not familiar with Brooks River, you're not familiar with Brooks Falls, this is a spot that's about 300 miles southwest of Anchorage. Again, it's in the middle of Katmai National Park. And this is the first spot really in the area where brown bears can come and catch fish. There's really no other place at this time of the year where brown rivers, but it's very, very difficult for them to catch fish anywhere else right now except for right here. The waterfall acts as a temporary barrier to the migrating salmon, so bears can afford to sit here and wait for the food to come to them instead of chasing them elsewhere. And there are 5 bears in view right at the falls now. And then if we pan downstream and zoom in, there are several more bears in that area. Some just ran out of our line of sight downstream. The area downstream usually requires a bit more of an active fishing style, chasing or trying to jump on the fish. Most often that area downstream, what we have nicknamed the riffles, is used by bears that are less dominant than the ones that typically fish at Brooks Falls. Because again, bears compete with one another for food resources and access to places where food is going to be. So these bears right down here, the ones that I see, are not quite large enough to hold their ground at Brooks Falls for those most preferred fishing spots. These are both young adults down here. It's hard to get an estimate on just how big they are. The biggest bear that we have here in view right now is the one that's actually entering the area that we call the jacuzzi. This is number 747. He's one of the most dominant bears on the river. Bears have a hierarchy. It's fluid. It can change from day to day. It certainly changes from season to season. And bears are intelligent enough that they remember each other from year to year. So a real big bear can throw his weight around one year, the other bears will remember that the next year. But if you're a big bear, you got to take advantage of your place in the hierarchy where you can, or when you can, because it's not going to last forever. There's always a younger bear that's trying to take your spot. Maybe a younger bear that's trying to test its boundaries. It wants to compete for fishing spots. It wants to compete for the females maybe that you're following, trying to mate with. So 747, he's a big boy right now, pushing 800 pounds easily. He might be, closer to the 900 pound mark. He might be the heftiest bear that we have on the river, and he's a regular here at Brooks Falls. We see him almost every night in July. Very skilled at fishing this plunge pool below Brooks Falls that we've nicknamed the jacuzzi. Now, if I were to have done this broadcast in 2007, number 747 might have yielded the jacuzzi to this bear right here, who is older than him, maybe by 5-6 years or so. This is number 480 Otis. He's a bear that we just saw arrive today. And he's a bear that's been coming here for, the past 15 years at least. We don't know, what year he was born. He was classified as a older subadult bear or a young adult. I think in 2001, if I remember correctly. And that would put him around 6 years of age or so. He's still a big guy, but he no longer has the body mass really to displace those younger bears like 747 that are really at the peak of their size. So 480 often has been relegated to some of the less preferred fishing spots, but he's a very experienced bear, very good at catching fish. So he just has to wait for the other bears to vacate those spots so he can be in the right place at the right time. Of course, at this time of the year, not only are bears coming here to feed on salmon, but there's a lot of other animals too. Salmon are the keystone of Katmai's ecosystem. This whole phenomenon that we see right here, the bear densities that we have, none of that would happen without salmon. And there's some gulls down here, actually 2 species of gulls. The one sort of in the background is a mew gull, like a cat mews, M-E-W. The one in the foreground, the larger gull, is a glaucous wing gull. And then there's a couple of black-billed magpies that are hovering on the fringes there. So many scavenging birds come to Brooks River. Their numbers increase quite dramatically when salmon are here and the bears are feeding on them, because those birds are not going to be able to catch and eat their own salmon. They need a larger predator to make that salmon available for them. And then there's also a bald eagle here that wants to do the same. It's going to pick up any fish scraps that the bears happen to leave behind. So not only are bears here in Katmai highly dependent on salmon, but there's a host of other wildlife species here that will feed on salmon. I've said this before, but I think, salmon are kind of like French fries. If you have the ability to eat them, you're going to eat them. Almost everybody likes French fries. And almost any animal that's adapted to feed on animal flesh is going to eat salmon. So not only are there brown bears and birds that feed on salmon here, but lynx will do that, wolves will do that, river otters, mink, practically anything that can't eat animal flesh is going to be feeding on salmon. So the abundance that we have here at Katmai is solely brought to us by these remarkable fish that move back into this area each and every year. Hopefully we'll get to see some salmon jumping at the falls tonight. We haven't seen really too many in the past hour or so. But there's fish in the water. 747 did catch one not long before I started the broadcast. And that's why that jacuzzi, that plunge pool, is so preferred by many of the big adult males here, because even if there aren't any salmon jumping the falls and there's not many swimming downstream and elsewhere, a lot of times they're churning in that plunge pool and they make mistakes. They bump into the bear, and if the bear's quick enough, and bears have excellent reflexes, they also have very rough paws, and they have, of course, big claws and big canines that they can easily grab onto that fish when they bump into them. So he's doing it by feel. He's waiting for the fish to bump into them. He can't really see into the water there. So again, biding his time, waiting for those fish. other bears that we have fishing at the falls right now. And I do talk a lot about the individuality of bears. And on the webcams, you can watch these animals and you can get to know them as individuals as well. It may be a little hard at first. You know, every bear kind of looks the same, just like every person looks the same. But when you really look at them and take a close look, you'll see that they all have different fur color, their ear shape is different. And in this case, this bear has many scars and wounds that make him fairly identifiable. Earlier in the year, this adult male here, number 83, had an open wound on his left shoulder, and that's healing very rapidly. If he turns and puts his butt towards us, we'll be able to see that he has a large wound on his rump that's fairly fresh, and that's courtesy of 747, who we just saw a little bit ago. So he's a mature adult male. Nearby, just a little bit further upstream from him, is number 814 Lurch. Lurch is a really big guy. From what I've seen, he's kind of like number 3 in the hierarchy, below 747 and another bear. He used to outrank those bears, but that's sort of shifted over the past few years. He's very recognizable in many ways because he happens to stand with a saddle back, almost like a horse. But if he turns and faces us and we get a good look at his head and face, you'll see that he's missing his right ear. You can't mistake him. He's the only bear that we know of on the river that's missing his right ear. He likely got that in a fight with another bear. And that happened last year. That is not an injury that he had this year. One of those questions that we get quite often is, how often do bears get into fights? And the answer is it's something that you don't see every day here at Brooks Falls, but if you watch the webcams enough, you'll certainly see that the bears do get into fights fairly frequently. It's not an everyday occurrence, but it happens here. Most of the time, the bears just avoid fights through posturing. They have a lot of behavioral signs and vocalizations that they throw at one another. They try to make each other look big and intimidating, because each one of these bears can inflict serious injury on one another. And even if you are a really sizable bear, you're a really big bear, and you attack a smaller bear, that doesn't mean that that smaller bear can't inflict some serious injury on you. And on the far side over here, this is an interesting bear. This is a bear that a lot of people like to watch. Number 755. He is nicknamed Scare D Bear. And he got that nickname when he was a fairly young bear. Because when he was a young bear, a subadult, and those are the bears that are independent of their mother, but they're not fully sexually mature yet. So they're between 2.5 and 5 or 6 years of age. When he was a young subadult bear, he would run from all other bears. He would run from people. Since that time, he's become fairly mature, fairly large. He ranks, fairly high in the hierarchy. He's not a small bear at all, so he holds his own in that far pool more often than not. However, he may he doesn't show much tolerance towards people. So some bears, it seems to be ingrained in their genes that that people are enemies. It doesn't matter if I'm holding a camera or a gun. The bear doesn't seem to make any sort of differentiation in those situations. For a long time, people, and in many ways, people still are competitors with bears for the same food resources. Good bear habitat is good people habitat. When Brooks Lodge downriver from me was established in 1950 within Katmai National Monument, there weren't that many bears fishing here. And that could be due to a variety of factors, not the least of which was a large volcanic eruption here in 1912. But it also could have something to do with the fact that people may have been dominating the falls for access to salmon at that time. So this phenomenon, I'm not going to say it's unprecedented within the history of Brooks Falls, because certainly there are times when people were absent from this place. But within the past several thousand years, there's a lot of evidence that suggests that people occupied the river in very large numbers. And if you are subsisting on salmon and you need that to survive the winter, you might not be very tolerant of these bears fishing here. So that was some of the competition that bears had to face here over the past several thousands of years. And some of those genes that got ingrained in bears maybe during that time and even before, that said, hey, stay away from people, they're dangerous, that still lives on in many bears. And with 755, we rarely see him come to the platform side of the river. So even myself standing up here on the wildlife viewing platform, and I'm 70 yards away from him, that can affect and alter how bears use this place. And that's the main reason why this platform here is closed from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. every day from June 15th to August 15th. It allows those bears who maybe aren't as tolerant of people the opportunity to fish without our disturbance. And 755 is one of those bears that may use the river a little bit differently when we're not here. When very few people or no people are here, we've seen him fishing on the lip of Brooks Falls, where those salmon happen to jump. So, wins. And 755 is one of those bears that may use the river a little bit differently when we're not here. When very few people or no people are here, we've seen him fishing on the lip of Brooks Falls, where those salmon happen to jump. So, when salmon are jumping, you're watching the webcam late at night, take a look for that. Look for 755 to move a little bit closer to the cam and try some different fishing spots. There's still not a whole lot of action here. Right at Brooks Falls, a lot of bears standing and waiting. That does pay off over time, because if a large little pulse of salmon shows up, they're going to be in position to take advantage of that. Downstream, though, we do have several bears fishing in that ripples area. So they're forming a sort of a square or a triangle, or excuse me, a diamond down there. So clockwise from the top is a adult female, number 289. On the right is a young adult male, number 151. The bear that just moved out of view on the right is number 410. She's walking away. There's another bear kind of in the top right corner of your view, and that's another young adult male, number 89, backpack. And then the one on the left side of the screen here is number 480, Otis, and I talked about him before. So again, standing and waiting for fish to come to them. They may do more chasing down here, more pouncing on fish, trying to surprise the fish, pin them to the ground, and then they can bite them with their teeth. Each salmon at this time of the year is extremely valuable in calories. I'll get to that in just a moment. It looks like 480 might be interacting with number 151 here. 480 is a bigger bear. He's not a particularly, what I would say, aggressive bear towards others. But if the opportunity presents itself, he may certainly displace other bears. This is just a great example of how bears avoid fights. 480 is bigger. 151 recognizes that. You can see 151, his head is down, his ears are slightly back. He's backing away, facing 480 pretty slowly, giving him a little bit more room. Now he might be trying to do-si-do around him just a little bit. You can see a 89 backpack in the background there, chasing some fish a bit more actively. The bears that have to chase fish like this, especially females with cubs, are expending large amounts of energy. But if they do catch one or several fish, they can make up the calories that they burned pretty quickly. Again, each fish at this time of the year contains about 4,500 calories. And I've seen bears eat as many as 20 fish in a day over just a few hours. And 20 fish times 4,500, that equals, about 90,000 calories or so. So it's not like they had a light meal. Bears live in a world that's really feast or famine. They need to eat 6 months worth of food, or excuse me, a year's worth of food in about 6 months. So every fish that they can get is extremely valuable to them. Number 480 is maybe one of the most favorite bears that people see on the bear cam. This is kind of a classic Otis posture that he has right there, sitting. Very good at conserving energy, very good at waiting for fish to come to him. We'll see him do this at Brooks Falls as well when he gets a little bit closer. He'll do it on the far side. He's very good also at fishing the jacuzzi, but anymore, since he's not as dominant, he more often than not has to wait his turn, wait for a bear like 747 to vacate that jacuzzi before he can move in. From time to time, I'll be glancing back down at the riffles. I did see a couple of females with cubs down there before the broadcast, so maybe they'll move back into our line of sight. Brooks River is a very short river. It's only about 1.5 miles long, and the falls almost truncates the river in half. It's a little bit further downstream than it is upstream, along the length of the river, but it's about halfway there. In many years, we've had more salmon here by June 30th than we do right now. It varies from year to year. The timing is never exactly the same. But typically, the peak of the salmon migration into this watershed here, or excuse me, the last week of June and the first week of July, seems like this year the salmon are just trickling in. The salmon run is forecasted to be very large, but I don't think they just have quite arrived here. Many of the other watersheds in the area have received fairly large numbers of salmon so far. So the salmon that come into the Naknek River and eventually make their way to Brooks River here probably are just a little bit late. And they were a little bit late last year as well. Even though we had a very early spring, the leaves in the trees came out very early. The birds nested very early here. But that doesn't really impact the salmon, of course, and they have no idea what the conditions are like until they get here, because they're out in the open ocean. No way to know, no way to judge what these freshwater conditions are like. So their timing tends to be more exact than the green up, and it doesn't really depend on the leaves on the trees or what the birds or bears are doing. Probably takes salmon about 2 days to get here from saltwater. The swim is about 60 miles. A salmon might be able to get here if it swam faster or straight through. But of course, they have to make a lot of decisions on their migration. Not only do they have to maybe navigate predators like beluga whales, and of course people that are fishing for them. but they also have to choose the right stream. And when they're navigating through fresh water, through the rivers, they're remembering what these places smell like to them. When they run out to sea as smolt, they imprint on the unique chemical signatures of all the waterways that they move through, and they can remember that. That is imprinted in their brains, and they can remember that when they're coming back. And they, more often than not, choose the right stream, and sometimes they go back almost to the exact same spot where they were spawned. Of course, everyone at home watching is patiently waiting for a bear to catch a fish. But I think the bears have far more patience maybe than people. And that is a signature characteristic of all bears. They know that food is going to come to them, and if they're patient, then they're going to wait and they're going to wait. These bears are not expending any more energy in the water than they would be really sleeping in the forest. And while in the forest, the salmon isn't going to come to you. You're sitting in the water waiting for the salmon. They're going to come to you eventually. And of course, there's a limit to that patience. Over time, if the salmon happen to fail to arrive, then these bears would eventually move on and see if salmon are in other locations. But it seems like they somehow know that this is pretty early in the salmon run. If they just give it a little bit more time, it seems like they've experienced in the past that they'll be rewarded. Oh, and number 83 just caught a fish. He was just rewarded for that patience. So we'll take a look at him as he eats this fish. He might move to the bank on the far side. And that might be just for a little bit of security. Bears do steal fish from other bears. In fact, 83 has done that today. And you can see that big open wound on his backside. That's not necessarily something that's going to hinder his survival. It can't feel good, of course, but his mobility doesn't seem to be impaired in any way. He had a very large open wound in almost the same spot last year, and he healed from that. And it was a pretty big bear in the fall. In fact, there's a blog post on Explore.org's blog that I wrote last week about that, before he got that big butt wound. But bears are very resilient creatures. They're incredibly tough. They deal with injury and pain that would put humans in the hospital for days, weeks, and maybe even kill us outright if we didn't have medical attention. But they're extremely, extremely tough animals. And he's eating this fish pretty quick. Sometimes I like to time how quickly the bears eat the fish. I've seen bears eat a whole, 4 to 7 pound salmon in less than a minute. He's eating it fairly quickly. I don't think he's gonna break any speed records with the speed that he's eating it right now. But he's eating the whole thing, and that indicates that he hasn't had a lot of fish today. When bears are really well fed, they'll leave a lot of the less energetic parts of the fish behind, like the entrails, the gill plates, even sometimes the salmon flesh. The fattiest parts of the fish are the skin, the brains, and the eggs. So calorie per calorie, if you can just eat skin, brains, and eggs, you're gonna, an ounce per ounce, you're gonna gain more calories. by eating those parts versus, you know, trying to fill up on bones and entrails. So obviously he's not done. He's going right back to that same spot. This is a place that he's fished repeatedly over the past several years. And look at that. So there was a salmon just pooled right in that little spot there. He felt it and he grabbed it. So again, quite a skilled bear for that spot right near the log. And I didn't time it last time, how quickly he ate it. We'll see. Maybe we can just judge. If nothing else of interest comes up, we'll watch him eat this fish, see if he eats it just as quickly. Bears, when they eat salmon, they often start at the tail. Seems like it's the belly. That seems like it's the easiest place to break through that tough skin. When they hold on to these slippery fish that are really fighting for their lives, that also demonstrates just how strong these bears are. Again, that's upwards of a 7-pound fish that's wiggling around in their mouth. And if you've ever tried to fillet a salmon, the skin is actually quite tough. It's a clean cut. But the bears seem to have really no problem tearing straight through that skin. The gulls that are here, they have a much harder time doing that. If a bear hasn't broken into that salmon flesh and through the skin, then the gulls have a much harder time getting to those nutritious parts. So that was fairly quick. You can see he has some salmon gore on his muzzle. While that was happening, 747 also caught a fish in the jacuzzi, kind of exited the jacuzzi just a little bit to eat it. Now he's right back at it. There's a few salmon jumping right now, so maybe it seems like we've had a small little pulse of fish. So he has another one. This is his second one in just a few moments. We'll take a look at how he decides if he lets us. He's shooting us the moon right now, but he always seems to turn his back to the wildlife viewing platform that I'm standing on. But he's very efficient at eating salmon too. Quickly strips the skin off. When he's well fed, he is one of those bears that will just eat the brain, the skin, and the eggs. And 747 is actually a massive bear. Again, probably the heaviest bear that, in my estimation, on the river. It's a big animal. It's really hard to judge just how big these animals are, standing here on the wildlife viewing platform like I am. But there are very few bears that can rival 747 in size. Just like people, bears, some of the are, some more than others are just, more predisposed to grow larger. Of course, it depends on how many salmon you catch, and you can see that 747 is very good at fishing that jacuzzi when the fish are there. So he was sitting there for quite a while without catching many fish at all. And that doesn't mean that he's not skilled at fishing that spot. That probably means there's just not a lot of salmon in there. But the patience paid off. So if you're keeping track at home, I think he caught one salmon right as we started the broadcast. He's just eaten two. This is his fourth in a half hour or so. And number 83 just caught a fish, and it looks like 814 is going to try to steal that. Or give a half-hearted attempt. We'll see if he pursues that. He did chase him downstream just a little bit, but then decided maybe it's not worth the effort. 814 is another bear that does steal fish. 83, isn't as big as him, but he's still pretty big, so perhaps 814 Lurch here decided, you know what, that bear is just a little too big for me to try to steal that fish. It's not worth the risk. Bears are often weighing risk versus reward when they challenge other bears. So 83 on the far bank over there, still eating his fish. Closer to us here, 747 still munching on that one that he caught recently. Nothing really goes to waste. Of course, the gulls, they are here to gorge on that salmon as well. And then you can see that hungry bears will wait for any leftovers too. So number 480 is just standing downstream on the right. He can smell that salmon. He can see that salmon that number 747 is eating. And I'd be willing to put a bet in that as soon as 747 moves away, 480 will go to that spot and see if there's any leftovers. Maybe the gulls won't let 480 get too much, but there's a few entrails there. And again, those are not the preferred parts of the fish. But Otis here again, he just arrived today, so he hasn't had much of an opportunity to catch any fish. If he does catch a fish tonight, we'll take another look at him. When bears first arrive here and they catch fish for the first time each season, it's almost like you can see a bit of satisfaction on their face, like they're famished, they're ravenous, and when people are very hungry, having a good meal in your belly is very comforting. And I really have no doubt that that's probably the same with our bears here. So a little bit of a pulse of fish up near Brooks Falls. Downstream, bears are still chasing fish. I'm not sure that they're actually catching any down here. Still, two bears in the riffles, a couple in the background. And the one that's running in the background right now, moving behind the trees, is an adult female that has 2 yearling cubs. There's another one running around down there that's single. She does not have cubs. If you want to know more about these bears, learn a little bit more about their life history, you can go to Katmai's website and download our free Bears of Brooks River photographic guide. Almost all of the bears that are commonly seen on the cams are in that book. And you can find the link to that just above the comments section on explore.org. So if you're watching on Facebook or you're watching on another page, you can also type into a search engine Katmai ebook, and it should be the first hit to the ebooks page where you can download that guide. So in the meantime, while we were looking downstream, number 83 caught another fish. He's on the far side, upper right, eating that. The rest of the bears, again, waiting patiently. And a bald eagle has just arrived. It's up on top of the spruce over here. Eagles will prey on gulls occasionally. Gulls will often harass the bald eagles. When I'm standing here and the gulls all of a sudden just kind of take off and they start screaming and calling, and they're all in flight at once, that's a really great indication for me to look for a bald eagle. The gulls almost always see a bald eagle before I do. And a lot of animals, there seems to be a lot of evidence that suggests that they're very hyper aware. And again, if you're a prey species, you really do need to pay attention, because if you're not vigilant, a moment, absent-minded moment where you're not paying attention, that could mean that another animal will attack and kill you. And that's not necessarily, something that most humans have to worry about this day and age. So number 83 is done with his fish. While he was over there, another bear happened to move into his fishing spot. And that's a number 89 backpack, and right near that log. So let's take a look at these two. I'm curious to know whether or not 83 is going to try to take that place near that log one more time, or if he's going to try to move into a different spot. And I'm curious to know if 83 is going to yield. And he does. So 83 has a few years on number 89, who's walking out of frame right now. He's a little bit larger, but that could flip-flop, next year, or even this year too, if 83 receives an injury that doesn't allow him to compete as strongly as number 89. And again, bears are competitors. It's tough to survive in their world, so they really do need to take advantage of any opportunity that presents itself. You just caught a glimpse of the 747 plunging his head into the water. That was probably an instance where a salmon bumped into him. He was really trying to grab it with his paws, with his jaws. Again, that's a spot where they have to fish by feel. Not only is the foam impede their vision, but at this time of the day, the sun is right in their eyes too. Sometimes 747 or another bear who's fishing the jacuzzi will turn towards us, and you can almost see them squinting because the sun is very bright. While 747 continues to fish in the jacuzzi here, we'll pan downstream. And 480 Otis resting, waiting his turn for the jacuzzi probably. They're still fishing downstream in the riffles. One of them just caught a fish and is moving behind the trees at upper right. One of those bears on the left over here in the riffles, I don't know if we've seen her so far during this this play-by-play here. This is number 410, likely to be the oldest bear that we know of on Brooks River. I think she was thought to be born in 1989, and she's been here every year since then. An old adult female approaching 30 years of age. This has been recently corrected on that age. It's 1988 that she was born. Someone from the peanut gallery here was giving me the correct information. And that's fine, actually. You shouldn't believe everything a ranger says. And 747, another fish for him. You can see that fish struggling for its life. If it doesn't free itself, it's certainly going to die. So they do their best, and sometimes they do escape, and they can survive for days or with some very serious injury to them, especially if they're close to their spawning site. So you can see how he is just peeling that skin right off. And that makes it a little bit easier for him to bite straight through that backbone. Now I'm going to zoom out just a little bit because number 480 is not quite begging fish from 747, but 747 is a very tolerant bear when he's well fed. Not always, but in many instances. These two bears have encountered one another for years. 747 knows that 480 is really not going to try to challenge him for that fish, for the fishing spot. Not going to try to steal it. So for him, it's not worth the energy to try to chase him away. He'll just sit there, he'll eat the fish, and then 480 will move to pick up the scraps if there's any left. And I think this is number 6 for him in less than an hour. 6 fish. Number 410 is moving over into this area too. She's very tolerant of other bears. She may have smelled that fish that 747 was eating. Bears don't share with one another. You can see that there wasn't really much left. And we'll take a look. 747 with his 7th fish in the past less than an hour, 45 minutes to 50 minutes. So 747, he's eating that fish there. 410, she's moving over. She wants some fish scraps. She may have not had too many meals today. But you can see how 480 moved right, hoping, trying his luck that maybe some salmon are in that location. And he can catch one before 747 moves back. So that'll be sort of an interesting thing for us to pay attention to here. And he almost got one. You see how it got lucky and it escaped. We're going to pan out here just to show you all the bears. You can see that their activity is really perked up. 814 just lunged after a fish and he missed it near those rocks. So 747's eating his fish a lot slower than he had before, and you can see how close 410 is to him. 410, especially, you know, her, she seems to be tolerated by a lot of other bears. Each one of these bears has its own, you know, unique disposition. And even though I said, you know, that he tolerated her, he kind of give her a little lunge, like she might be a little too close. So she's going to move in, she's going to eat those leftovers. Now Otis over here in the jacuzzi, he's about to be displaced. You can listen to him growling. That growl he would use to displace bears like 747 just a few years ago. But it doesn't seem to work anymore. And now he's actually chasing 410 a little bit. He wants some of those fish guts over there. Each time that we're looking, you know, at a bear interact with one another, it's you know, another example of their levels of competitiveness. They need to compete with one another to survive. Those are those sort of, I think, you know, themes and characteristics and meanings associated with these animals. No matter what we happen to see them doing, they're always in a competition to survive. They live in a very harsh world. So even though we might have, you know, certain bears here that we like to watch more than others, like Otis and like 410, that doesn't mean they're going to be nice to one another. There's no social safety net for them. They have a bad year, that could be it for them. So we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bears right at the falls. The one that's moving downstream is a young adult male, number 274. We believe that he was raised as a cub here in the Brooks River area. And I think he's from a 2007 litter. He's very long-legged. He's not abnormally sized for a bear that is this age. He's just kind of a tall bear. He will attempt to steal fish. You can see him chasing. Maybe he caught sight of a salmon down there. And of course, several bears still trying their skill, testing their skill down in the riffles area. This is almost kind of reminds me of the game of Hungry Hungry Hippos down in the riffles right now. Each one of them plunging, looking for salmon. That's a tougher area to fish than up at Brooks Falls. You definitely have to expend more energy to catch fish down there. So I have 12 bears, all adult bears, within my line of sight right now. So the bears that you see in the riffles area that I'm showing you, and then that includes the bears that are right at Brooks Falls too. That's maybe the most that I've seen so far this year. The most that I've seen within my line of sight from Brooks Falls, not including cubs, has been 22 bears. And that includes everything that I can see upstream and downstream. Bear numbers here along the river vary from year to year. Last year we had about 49 individual bears. And the majority of those were seen in July and also in September and October when they come back to feed on the dead and dying salmon. And I'm going to pan right over here quickly because 814 just caught a fish. Again, Lars just caught a fish here. And really he caught it maybe 10 seconds before I showed you on the cam. And look how quickly he's eating that. So that whole fish was definitely consumed in less than a minute. That was not his first fish of the year, but maybe he hasn't had many fish today, so he definitely looked to be a hungry animal. So I'm looking around right now, and I don't see any cubs. I know she had them just a little bit ago, so they're probably in the forest somewhere. So coming to the lip of Brooks Falls right now is number 402. She's a mature adult female. The litter that she has is her fifth. And she's one of the few bears that's very skilled at catching fish at Brooks, on the lip of Brooks Falls. This is also a spot, when you're on the lip of the falls where you need to be patient. It's also a place where it takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice to learn how to fish that spot. It's 8 p.m. Alaska time. There's a lot of activity going on right now. So I'm going to stay with you for another 10 minutes. My name is Mike Fitz, and I'm a park ranger at Katmai National Park and Preserve. And I'm happy to be talking about the bears and what we see here at Brooks Falls. If you're not familiar with this location, I'm 300 miles southwest of Anchorage, Alaska. I'm standing on a wildlife viewing platform adjacent to Brooks Falls. And our webcam partner, Explore.org, has proudly funded and provided the equipment and technical expertise to bring these brown bears live to you at home. So thanks for joining me this evening, and I'll stay with you for another 10 minutes or so. So I have some scouts looking for me right now for those yearling cubs. 402 again, she's waiting for salmon to jump right to her. Over here we have a possible attempt at stealing fish, maybe not. 83, who is on the left there, He got several fish recently, so maybe he's not as hungry. But earlier today, he did steal a fish from 410. Who is the female bear that's walking downstream of the island. So it looks like she's going to move to the forest where she can eat her fish in a slightly more secure location. She doesn't have to worry about a bear taking it from her. It may seem unfair, but again, bears live out in a world that exists outside of our ethics and moral boundaries. So to them, stealing fish is a perfectly acceptable survival strategy and very effective. So 402, this is one of the, one of the more iconic scenes in all of national parks. Most photographers who come to Brooks Falls want to catch that moment right before the salmon is caught in the bear's jaws. This scene was, made famous in the late 1980s by some wildlife photographers. But when I see bears trying this technique here, fishing on the lip, I always think about how difficult it would be for me to try to catch a salmon leaping into my mouth. Again, the salmon on average, they weigh 4 to 7 pounds. So for me, it would be like I was standing somewhere and someone threw a 5-pound sack of flour at my face and I was supposed to catch it in my mouth. So an incredible amount of skill and an incredible amount of strength that allows them to do this. And there is still no sign of 402's cubs. We're still looking, so she must have stashed them in the forest somewhere. She's one of the few females that will fish Brooks Falls with cubs. Most of the females avoid the area when they're caring for offspring, probably because it's just dangerous to be around other bears. Bears do kill cubs. Not only male bears, most of the time it's male bears, but females will do it too. Sometimes they eat them, sometimes they don't. They could kill cubs because they want to cause the female to go back into estrus, maybe if they have the opportunity to mate with them. It's really hard to say. It's not a fully understood behavior. And 402 has lost cubs up here at Brooks Falls, so she knows the risks, certainly. But again, the potential reward is quite large if she can get enough food to survive and nurse her cubs for another year. And these bears are here right now really because, they don't know of a better place to fish. Sometimes in a place as large as Katmai National Park, many people think, well, oh, sure, if a bear doesn't like people, then it can just go somewhere else in the 4 million acre park and find a spot to fish. And while technically that might be true, that doesn't mean that individual bear really knows of a spot where it can do that. So that's why we have to be very careful when we're visiting here about how we interact with the animals, thinking about whether or not we should occupy, the same spaces that they need to survive. And when I'm here, that's why I really try to stick to the wildlife viewing platforms when I'm viewing bears. Because if we position ourselves in predictable locations, then it's much more likely that bears are going to be able to learn to work around us and learn to tolerate us in those certain locations. When we are dispersed throughout the area and we're moving in maybe a less predictable manner, then it's harder for bears to learn to work around us. It's a really fantastic scene here at Brooks Falls this evening. Not only 402 on the lip of the falls, but many other bears. So again, I can see 12 bears within my line of sight, looking upstream and downstream. Most of them standing right at Brooks Falls. It's about 10 minutes after 8 p.m. Alaska time, again on June 30th, 2016. Glad you joined me on this broadcast this evening. My name is Mike Fitz, and I'm a park ranger at Katmai National Park and Preserve. I hope you learned a little bit about our bears here. Again, feel free to get to know these animals as individuals. Each one of them brings their own story to the river here. They're all bears, of course, but they're all different in their own ways, all with different life histories, different experiences, different ways of making a living. So I encourage you to get to know them. Chat with other cam viewers in the comments at the bottom of the page, any bear cam page on explore.org. And more rangers like myself will be online to chat with you again. In fact, I think I have a play-by-play scheduled for 7 p.m. again tomorrow, July 1st. So you're welcome to join me during that broadcast, and hopefully we'll see a few great things like we did this evening. So learn about the individuality of these animals, their ways that they compete with one another, the way they survive with one another. And I will be talking to you soon. Thanks again for joining me, everyone.